So we're talking about tariffs. It's my favorite topic.
Of course it is. But
we've talked about it so often, actually, recently.
I want to tell you a funny story. So a year and a half ago, I was running for Congress, 3rd Congressional District. And one of the key things I was highlighting for folks is that America, whether it's our economy, whether it's our military, we're so heavily dependent on rare earth elements that almost exclusively come out of China.
Yeah.
And this has really heated up in the last few days.
Yeah. What's interesting, right, is we are super dependent, and President Trump has said there's now going to be 100% tariff on all Chinese imports starting November 1st, which is just over 2 weeks away.
So the trade deal has now fallen apart.
It's fallen apart.
Because China said we're going to restrict rare earth elements and things that are built out of rare earth elements. And these are magnets in our electronic cars. It goes into our electronics for our phones, but you can think about it as our weapons systems and so forth.
Well, right. We're just talking about World War III.
World War III. And here we are heavily dependent on what may be one of our biggest adversaries in the future.
Yeah. And, it's so the trade war thing, it's really interesting. So basically, I think Beijing, Xi Jinping has basically said, whatever, I'm not going to negotiate with you. And he's just headed off elsewhere, right? So he's vowed retaliation. He called the move hostile to say this 100% tariff increase. But I have to tell you this, exports to the United States from China fell 27% in September from the year before. But their overall growth in global exports rose. Right. So they're just basically saying, fine, then we'll just go elsewhere.
Yes, yeah, we'll go elsewhere.
That's exactly what happens. Imagine that.
And we're so heavily dependent, and we can't get this elsewhere. And one of my complaints for decades, we have locked up our public lands where we have these rare earth elements that we could harvest, we could manufacture, we could supply at least our demands, but we've tied it up. For some reason, we've pretended as if we're protecting the environment, but we've weakened ourselves in the process.
So what do you think is going to happen with the tariffs? I mean, we've seen all year, well, it's going to be 250%. And I'm talking generally, not specifically to China. It's going to be 250. Now it's going to be 45. And then it's going to be 100. And then, there's so much whiplash with the tariffs that it seemed like they were getting close to a deal. And then President Trump is like, fine, never mind. It's going to be 100%. And President Xi is like, okay, fine.
Well, and some folks think that Trump's getting bad advice when it comes to tariffs. I don't believe that's the case. I believe Trump is a tariff man. He believes in tariffs. He believes that if we impose tariffs, it will somehow protect the U.S. economy, that it will strengthen our supply chain and get manufacturing supply expanded and growing in the U.S. But it takes a long time to realign the supply chain. It's one of those things. The U.S. is still a great country when it comes to innovation. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to manufacturing, that's where China has really shown its greatness. And that's the challenge. We got to do more than just innovate. We have to be able to manufacture those innovations if we're going to really have a strong economy. And in the process of manufacturing, you gain some skills. And the fact that we've lost manufacturing skills, we've lost certain core competencies, if you will, that have been offshored. It's going to take quite a while for us to bring it back. And if you're a businessman or woman and you're investing, and you're going to get whipsawed, on again, off again, on again, off again. Maybe it's on again with this administration, off again with the next. And that investment is going to take decades to pay off. You're not going to invest.
Yeah, that's right.
And I seem to recall back last administration, we put tariffs on steel. So what did Harley-Davidson do? They kept manufacturing for their U.S. market, but they moved everything else to Mexico to manufacture for the rest of the world, which was not growing American jobs. It actually backfired from my perspective.
Right. And I think that's what we're seeing, right, is we're starting to see economic fallout. We're seeing that U.S. importers can no longer absorb the cost. They were trying to, but now they're passing them on to consumers. We see prices rising on electronics and furniture and groceries. We know that we're heading into the holiday season. I feel like we're in it. Once you hit the middle of October, man, it's just Christmas from here on out. But most of our toys and stuff, they're coming from China.
I turned on a radio station playing Christmas
music
already.
Yippee!
Christmas
I love
in October.
Christmas music. Yeah, but it's those have real impacts, right, on real families. And I think it'll be interesting to me to see what happens with China, because so far it feels like many of the countries are like, fine. We'll come to the table. What can we do, right? And I don't see that with China.
No, and Beijing is calling the tariffs a double standard.
Yeah.
And I can totally see, and not just the tariffs, but there are certain semiconductor chips that we don't want to supply to China for national security purposes. And they're flipping around and playing the same, if you will, game against us, saying for national security purposes, we're not going to supply the U.S. And so it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out and see what kind of brokering of, okay, you supply this in exchange for supplying that. And we sometimes, we think about it's trade between countries, like it's trade between Trump and Xi Jinping. It's really trade between companies and individuals and so forth. It is not country versus country. It is all sorts of, you and I, when we buy things at Walmart or whoever it might be, Ford manufacturing, Ford Motors. It's an interesting, complex situation.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned, and you've mentioned, I just came back from Africa. So my son got married there. We adopted him from Ethiopia when he was 10, and he met an Ethiopian woman in Colorado, and they went back there to get married. It was very elaborate. But I will tell you,
it was a week worth of
it was a week worth of celebration and then travel on both sides of that, right? So I was gone for 2 weeks. But China is everywhere. It's everywhere in Africa. It's everywhere in Ethiopia. So they have electric cars. They were all over the roads. The infrastructure stuff, they've done their Belt and Road initiative, which basically helps developing countries with infrastructure, but then there's strings, right? There's strings attached. And we have just missed out in the United States, I think, of having our innovation reach some of these developing countries. And China has been there to say, we'll be there, we'll pick up the pieces. The U.S. is not going to pay for foreign aid anymore. We'll do that. We'll pay for those medications, right? And I think sometimes we just underestimate that they're not our friends.
Well, and look at the peace deal today.
Yeah.
Okay, our hard and soft power there
versus
our soft power in other places where we're pulling back and becoming, from my perspective, more isolationist. Well, when we do that, my fear is China then steps into the void.
That is right.
Backstops these countries, backstops these administrations, these various countries. They're viewed as a trusted player. And right now, the U.S. in many fronts is viewed as unreliable. They were trusted in the past, but right now they're unpredictable. What's really going to happen? Right. And that's where I think there's a loss, because the U.S. soft power, I'm not talking money, I'm just talking soft power and influence out there, just does amazing things and has a great history.
Yeah. It's, one of the things that we learned during the pandemic that we're also reliant on China for is our medications. Right? So much of the medication we use every day comes from China, supply chain coming from China. And if you remember just the personal protective equipment, right, the PPE stuff, and China was right there to say, here we are. Was it semi-defective? Yes, it was, right? But they were first out of the gate to say, we'll send it everywhere. And we in the United States were like, oh my gosh, we don't have enough ibuprofen, and we don't have enough, stuff for the anesthesia to happen in hospitals, and we don't have enough Pitocin for women in labor. And guess where it was all coming from?
China.
Yep.
China. And we thought, hey, we know how to innovate. We're good.
We're good. And we are good.
Innovation is not good enough.
That's right. That's right. So that's an interesting discussion. We'll see if people start to feel the effects of those tariffs as we head into the holiday season. Again, we've talked about this on the show before with Greg. We talked about Christmas trees. Most of the artificial Christmas trees also come from China. Most of the toys come from China, right? And so have you planned that far ahead? I don't know. I mean, I wasn't planning on buying a new tree.
When elections start kicking off really in 2026, how that
that's
will play
right.
into those elections.
I think for sure it will, right? It's always, who said it? It's the economy stupid. Was that Bill Clinton? Right?
It was James Carville.
Okay.
He worked for
during
Bill
that
Clinton,
election. Yeah, right.
And it's still the economy stupid.
That's right. It still is all these years later.